call the meeting of the Conservation Commission for August 16th open. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make the motion.
Second that.
You can say it, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And we might as well open the continued public hearing for 11 Stony Road for the INRAD. And we're open. And
You want to put it up?
I know some of the members have been out or tried to go out to take a look and looked at some of it. But John, what have you, anything?
Mr. Self, you don't really have to comment any more about the plan. I mean, you felt that.
Yeah, we're here again. It's through the ANRAD process. We've delineated, and we're really just waiting for the board to give us a direction. We'd like to go to the next phase as far as showing proposed subdivision and see what we cannot do within your buffer areas and to try to get a proposal into the planning board again through your process as well.
Okay. I'll read what my report is to the commission members so that the audience knows what I've reported. The applicant and his engineer are requesting approval of a wetland line along a bordering vegetated wetland and around an isolated wetland. I had reported that we needed an additional check at the last meeting, and I was mistaken. I went back and I reviewed the application, and everything was in order. So I apologize for that. The applicant has calculated the correct fee. If the commission approves the line, the applicant will be requesting a few waivers and offering some mitigation in exchange when they again appear before the commission with an actual project they want to construct. This is not something that's on this plan here, but they've talked with me about it so that in the next step they were wondering if there was any consideration for granting a waiver on some of the buffers, and I suggested, and this isn't in the report, but I had suggested that they offer some forms of mitigation to justify any waiver that you might be interested in granting. Those details will be discussed in an informal meeting where the applicant explained the intent before going into an engineering design. I had suggested that since it's a lot easier to talk about these things on an informal basis where there isn't timelines, timeframes that you have to live by, and that the commission isn't formally voting on anything, they're just giving some input and their ideas about what's being asked. And so after suggesting it, I assume that they probably would want to take us up on that. So the bottom line is I don't have any issues with the flagging as delineated by the botanist. The pond that has the water in it, and it still has some water in it even with this drought period, but it's probably down a good, 4, 5, 6 feet from where the high water mark is. And that's located to the far right of that plan that you're looking up there, and off the property that's shadowed in the green line is the subject property. This pond is actually on the remaining land of Mr. Smith. And so the isolated depression has no water in it. It's typically a isolated wetland with wetness in the spring. I'm sure that if we went out there in March, April, May, we'd probably see some standing water in it. It's very small. They are showing the boundary and the 50-foot buffer around it, so they're not ignoring that it's there. And because of the review of the site conditions and the locations of the flagging, I have no issues and will recommend, if it's the will of the commission, to issue an order of resource area delineation which approves the line.
Anybody have questions from the board?
No.
Anybody in the audience have any questions? Okay. Again, we're just here tonight to certify where the wetland line is, and that's the first step in the process. Then they'll have to come back with a design of what they want to do and where they want to place everything. But at this point, we're just looking at the wetland line and saying where the flags are and everything else is correct. Hearing no other questions or comments, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And I will entertain a motion to issue an order of resource area delineation for the plan.
I'll make the motion.
Second that.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Could I ask the commission, we thank you very much, by the way, for your final approval of the land. What we'd like to do is if we could set up a second preliminary hearing. We'd like to show you the design, number of lots, where we'd like to have you take a look at where the buffer is around the isolated land, not the wetland, bordering vegetated wetland area. We'll stay well outside of that. Just logistically, it has a lot to do with the number of lots we could do to make the road pay for the number of lots. It also includes us locating drainage for the roadway containment somewhere in an area that may or may not be, at least have to pass through the buffer, but something, outside of the buffer, or maybe partly in that 100-foot, the 50-foot buffer in the isolated area. But we'd like to come in with a little bit more feedback, to get feedback from the commission of where we are with trying to design the actual lotting and some of the drainage and the infrastructure there. If that would be something we could, sit down with the board and we'll schedule something with John.
Well, I think what we want to try to do is, even if it is informal and it's not going to be a advertised public hearing, that type of thing, I think the abutters that are here tonight deserve to know some of the things that are discussed in an informal basis, so that it's not secretive or anything.
Is this
like
something
that.
you want looking at for tonight? I mean, I have a preliminary lotting plan, or you want to do that at the next
You want to do
meeting?
it tonight, or?
I don't, yeah, we can do it tonight. We don't have a big agenda, so.
I think our next agenda is pretty busy, and they're here anyway.
We could-
The abutters are here anyway, so.
Can I
Yes.
ask a question? What's the plan for the street itself gonna be affected? Are they gonna try to widen it?
Oh, Stony Road?
Yeah.
That,
Right at that entrance to the 11.
that could potentially, and I can't speak for the planning board, but that would be definitely something the planning board would want to talk about, because if, let's say it was a dirt road, so even if they could, yeah, I know, but if it were,
Yeah.
and they could meet all the new planning board rules and regulations for the inside, this development here, if they're coming off a substandard road, a dirt road, for example, and I know it's not, they would have to satisfy the planning board that it was safe to get into this subdivision. Yes, you designed it correctly to all our standards, but we don't think people can get into it safely. So you want to ask the planning board about that type of thing. We wouldn't have any jurisdiction on that.
Again, we understand that this process only gets us to be able to complete our design and then go and file with the planning board. So there's multiple more public hearings, and opportunities for the abutters to come and voice their concerns and/or, to see a better idea of the final design. At this point, we have no intentions of changing anything to do with Stony Road. We feel that most of the traffic that will, be a result of these lots will certainly probably go out towards the Mill Pond area, out to, I believe it's Crescent Street, and very few will go, back around the smaller part, I think around Spring Street to get back out. But having said that, it's the lotting plan that we've tried to accomplish is is, I don't want to shun the board, I mean the audience, but I want to show the commission.
Can we take pictures of that?
If we extend our roadway now, if we're looking for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total lots out of the roadway. Our road would certainly stay outside of your buffer, your 50-foot buffer off your wetland area here. In a couple of areas that we would be looking at would be certainly, it would be just this area where you see the pink that would be inside the 50-foot buffer. We would try to have some type of a drainage to be able to get through to this area, back out and through here. Maybe reserve that for detention area, recharge area. We would try to design it such that as much as possible we kept outside of your, certainly nothing inside this buffer, but something maybe in this area through in here. And the only, it's, as you can see, it may be tough if we can't fill or replicate that low area. If that's not an option through your bylaw and or through your commission, something that if we were able to fill this small depression and create something over in here that would be more adaptable to the wetlands and still provide some outfall for drainage, that's something we can entertain with the commission. I'm not sure how adamant you
Where would
be
you do the
filling it.
50-foot? Because we generally, the 50-foot no touch, we stay to the 50-foot no touch. So
Okay.
what we would ask is, it's the wetland line plus the 50 feet is going to be replicated or duplicated if you were to fill that area in. I'm just looking to see how much space that
So
leaves.
in other words, if this area here, you would consider that as being a replication area, you'd have to
Find a
double this
spot.
area, which we wouldn't have. and that
Right.
would be-
Right.
So, it has a lot to do. If there's no opportunity for us to fill that low depressed area, then we'll certainly not entertain any of that in our design coming back. If that's something that the board strongly feels on, we're not gonna waste your time nor our design. But the options that we'd like to put in, John had mentioned that Mr. Smith, Craig owns, 6 and some odd acres of land coming back out this spring. And a lot of it in this type of a configuration, in which you do have a small ponding area down through here and a small, feeder brook that leads out of that going, down grading up to the other wet areas. It would be something that he would certainly entertain, turning that over to the conservation. We'd like to maybe, next meeting, come in and show the area, what it would be, come in with a couple of different concepts and see what the commission's, feeling on that would be. Show you a little bit more of exactly what activity we're looking to use and where we're gonna use it.
Because you're trying to get how many buildable lots out of that?
Well, right now, these 2 Form A lots are already off.
Right, those are off the-
yeah.
yep.
So right now, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lots at the end of, off that side.
Which you want to be building on all 5.
Well, that's.
That's the, I
You want me
understand
to
that they're a
honestly
developer
answer? Yes, sir.
and they want to
Yeah.
develop
Yeah,
everything.
of course, that's true. Now, if there's something that we can't provide, certainly,
Well, lot number 5, the farthest one to the right, there's no way you're going to get anything outside of the 50-foot.
this here.
Yeah.
So-
Even if you move that 50-foot line.
Right. So that would be something that, thinking ahead, that this would, what we would entertain towards the back area here, if we could provide our drainage basin. Try to direct our water, if you remember the last meeting, that this street's high, all coming down to a low area. So we really have a lot, we can work with the topography to make something work. We're pretty comfortable. If we had to run a pipe through here to be able to feed this area, that would be the concession or the activity we'd ask the commission. If we run a pipe, replicate it back to what it normally would be, even though it's in the buffer, but it would, it'd just be for access for any
Excuse me?
maintenance.
From where does the water run from and to?
It runs, the grading of this property runs from Stony Road as the high point, all the way down to the low point.
The
It
low
all
point
comes
being
this
Mill
way.
Pond Road?
No. Hill Pond Road runs parallel with this. As we had mentioned at the last meeting, we would in our design, because of the grading of these lots, we would show that we would also construct a swale down here, natural swale that would just take natural runoff. It's not something we're increasing, it's something we could provide an avenue to go, so you wouldn't have any of this activity the shedding of the grading of the lots onto adjacent property. That's just natural design with any subdivision. And that's something we can entertain, putting it in that drainage, and again, getting back over that side. And those are some of the things we could show, the commission.
Would your design place a couple of catch basins at the entrance which would collect water from, because Stony Road is coming downhill towards Mill Pond, which is the bottom of your, the lots on the
Yeah.
plan.
At this time, we have to, that really would be something, we'd be having meetings with the planning board, also with the DPW. We'd want to have, their input. Normally what we do here is we put a catch basin here and a catch basin here, and only handle our drainage. Again, this topography all feeds down here. We're not putting any more water into Stony Road than really is going down, that's going there now. Certainly, we're not increasing any runoff back to that road.
And with that swale that you're gonna put in behind the lots there,
Yeah, it
what
would be-
about the roof runoffs?
Well,
No.
two things you do with the roof runoffs. We put them in the subsurface right there, put some small units if you have a septic system repair, you have these Cultec units, and you put those at the downspouts. They go directly back into the ground as a recharge. So that minimizes actually the roof runoff that you'll be creating. Again, but anything that wouldn't handle the roof runoff, it's still not increasing any flow off to adjacent properties that's going there now. But more importantly, we would decrease it because we would put a swale, just a very low swale through final grading that would allow any of this grass runoff to come down here and be redirected back into the drainage here and back over to some type of a detention area, and then let it flow back where it would normally have always gone. But we're going to take the velocity out of it.
So would the swale go like this? On
Yeah,
both
yeah, but
sides?
it would be more of a gentle slope.
Right,
All the final.
and this way.
No, it goes parallel with the street.
Yeah.
So all of your runoff that would normally come from this now going down here, it's gonna be interfered with or stopped by the construction of the roadway, and then the street drainage handles that runoff. And that's what all this water that would normally go this way is now contained in the street runoff and then directed back here to let it flow into the wetland. Replenishes the wetland, but doesn't overtax it. This swale would be just one measure. The only purpose of this is to keep runoff from naturally either now or in the future when the final lots are all built and graded. You would have no runoff onto the adjacent properties because it is down gradient from this point down to here.
So the property, the land line on this side would be higher than the land on that
Right,
side?
exactly.
All right.
In other words, you'd come down, if you had your lot, if your lot is over here in Mill Pond, you'd have your grass would be sloped, and then there'd be a gentle swale that went this way.
Right, so
So
come back
that-
up on the other side.
Exactly. So it contains and stops any water that was passing directly through into the backyards on the heavy rain. It would be redirected into the swale. Now, the swale would have a grade, from this point going down this way, and then put it back into the trunk lines here to try to get it over here and let it flow back and replenish this whole wetland area here.
But then you're altering the wetlands.
No, we're not going in the wetlands. We're staying out of the wetlands.
And they would have to control the amount of runoff that goes into it so that they're not swamping the wetland. What they have to do is match what comes off the land now into the wetland that feeds it with its water that it needs, so that they don't put any more that's going in there today with the future development of this, which would increase runoff, but they have to store it and hold it back and let it go in at a slower rate. I have a question about the lot to the far right, and it would be on the upper side, the northerly side. If you were trying to get a house there and a detention basin, what your idea was that you were going to encroach on the 50-foot buffer and possibly fill in the isolated
Right.
parcel. I think one of the things that the commission should be able to tell you tonight is a definite about the isolated land. I mean, it's.
Yeah, I think I got the message fairly
Okay.
clear. In anticipation, I think, yes, I think it would work with the four, as long as we could if we could have some relief on this buffer, we could put a house on way on this side, leave this in place, and then have everything, any activity outside that.
And
And
to
that-
compensate for that, where everything else is tight, because I'm envisioning a fairly large detention basin on that far right lot. Is there a possibility of, on the very northerly side of that wetland boundary on that map to the far right, when I walk through there, I noticed that it's pretty good upland,
Right.
but it's on the other parcel owned by Mr. Smith. Is there a way to incorporate some additional buffer over on that parcel that would compensate for whatever you might lose on that lot number 3, is it?
Well, I think if we have an older plan done, but we physically show where this line would be down here. This wetland line actually extends this way, comes back down this way. This is a very, very narrow piece coming through here. It opens up a little bit over here. But this buffer line would, because you can't get through here, we're not asking for anything other than being able to put our detention area right in this area through here. We feel we could probably make that work, still leave it without having to fill this, still making this basically a drainage lot. Convey that over the town, whatever purposes we'd have to do. And this is the lot that's crucial to the subdivision work. If we can get that fourth lot, I think we can now, have something we can actually design and be still successful on. But this area here would really is something we would need for the drainage. So if we can't fill this, then we really wouldn't be a buildable lot. And it's important for the commission to give us, your honest feeling, direction,
I mean,
what we need to.
you can replicate somewhere on either that land or adjacent land or other land you have in town
Right.
to create the replacement. I mean, we've entertained that before in the past.
And that's
to-
was another point I was gonna ask. With our plan coming in, we'd like to show maybe there is something in here, mostly upland that we could use if we could get our drainage somewhere where, we'd like to propose some kind of a trade-off, as long as the commission would entertain an idea of what we're trying to do. And in turn, again, Craig, the owner of the property now is trying to sell his properties. He's worked all his life, he wants to go south, he's gonna be not gonna be a snow bunny though, right? He's gonna just move down there. So, he's got 6 some odd acres, so we're gonna entertain what he thinks that he could in turn over to the conservation, and that'd be a much bigger plan that we'd show you. And then, ask for your compensation or your consideration of what we can do and try to make the subdivision work financially.
Well, I'm also trying to sell this property that I still own to someone in 61A with horses that wants to do a farm like I had intended to do, but unfortunately, my health does not allow me to do this. There is 6.85 acres left. Depending on how much you take, my house, my barn, and my garage, I went to the assessor's office, and I will have 5.7 acres without the buildings. And you need 5 to consider that to be 61A. I'm trying to keep as much property into 61A as possible.
I mean, I think that's something we could discuss. The plan coming into the commission would show what Craig feels, still maintain the value of the other acreage to sell off. And the same thing, offer something to the conservation for his consideration of where we can work, within the buffer areas. So that would be
Now, is that road in the buffer area there? The pink?
The layout is.
Yeah,
Right,
potentially
this
there's that. yeah.
small portion here, if I had to redesign, I could certainly try to redesign out here. We're trying to make this a feasible, a halfway decent lot. Thinking if we did lose this, it's a minor thing, it's more of a, you're probably in the sidewalk area with a buffer, but it would just be still roomed and seeded type of a thing.
Typically, what the commission does for something like, let's say it was the sidewalk, a small area like that. They would want you to enhance the 50-foot buffer adjacent to that isolated wetland by planting something that would create an enhancement to the purpose of a buffer. We just don't use a buffer to have a setback, keep you away from wetlands. We also recognize that it serves a great habitat, food source
Right.
for the
Bushes,
wildlife.
berries, something that feeds the.
So you'd have to do something like that. So I'm kind of hearing that it's a definite no on filling the isolated depression. So I think that's completely off the table at this point, that you just don't even think about filling in that wetland.
Well, at this point, unless we can come back with something that we feel would be a generous,
Mitigation?
A mitigation enhancement or
consideration.
addition to it on
Yeah, just to
another.
show that, well, certainly the value of what we're trying to do here would certainly compensate that plus more of us being able to really make that a substantially nice lot. We understand that this was always tight, so at this point in time, that's what we're looking at more than anything else. At least get 4 good solid lots and still leave as much as we can and providing more coming back out of this property.
I have a
That's something
question for
we
the
can
commission. What is the commission's feeling about a temporary disturbance where they would cut a trench through to run their drainage pipes from the end of the road to a detention basin on that far right lot and then let it grow back? Is that something that it would be temporary and eventually go back?
Which side?
To go basically from where that circular part is cut through.
Cut through to a
That
basin
50
on
foot.
that upper part?
I mean, I would think more timing, the time of year when it's
Ideally,
least-
ideally, on the location would be, you have your isolated area here. A location to be able to provide this drainage to get into this area would be a pipe, subsurface. A 10-foot swath through whatever is there, as far as vegetation through this wet, outside of your 50-foot here, but just right inside here, to be able to outfall in here and let this be the area that would serve for your detention. But it could be put in and replicated however the commission would feel would be something that you'd want to
Plant
see.
something
planted
back in that area
Exactly.
that you had to disturb for the pipe.
Right. The other thing I think we all know happens, but you don't see it on a plan, is when you do cut down or cut around any area that the forest that you cut out, it leaves the forest that you didn't know there. It doesn't look like it should. It's all dead branches. I would look forward to seeing something through the planning board stage of talking about that with the conservation. When through your inspection, if we saw something around the edges of where the buffer is there something you'd want trimmed out, maybe low bush planted around that, something to enhance the look of the buffer and still preserve it. That's something we could do through the planning board stage, through your notice of intent view.
That's
It's just something I
why,
wonder.
that's why they like the enhancement ideas, because you're right, you cut up to the 50-foot line, and it could be a edge of a pine tree, and because pine trees are pretty high, and there's usually dead branches
Exactly.
from, let's say, ground level all the way up to 20-25 feet or more, all of a sudden you got basically a change in light conditions and everything. One thing that does happen, though, is what happened to this piece of land after it was cleared. The dense ground cover is starting to shoot up now, and that's what will happen along there. And sometimes you get the invasive species, which out there you're getting a lot of briars, multiflora, rose, and buckthorn alder. And it's going to pot, basically.
I have all those in my legs, just for the survey part, so I know it's just.
And so, that isn't something that we like to see either, because it's
Right.
not natural. It's something that's replacing, what was originally there, which was usually ferns, low, plants that are ground covers, usually some low shrubs, and now you're getting the invasives coming in, so.
And I think that's something maybe you can entertain, you know, through an order of conditions. Something, inspections all the way through the process, you know, until the roadway is finalized and reviewed and approved, that type of a thing. I mean, it could be an open issue. Certainly the developer wants to have this as nice as possible. It's a beautiful area of town. And he's expecting to put some pretty nice, you know, new colonials in there. You know, really be nice.
It's
You know.
an oxymoron, isn't it?
What's that?
New colonials.
Well, what about, I got an old colonial, I'm not understanding your comments there.
We're gonna put it all in there.
That's tough to put
And
in
I'm not
order.
painting it anymore.
Colonial style.
Yeah. Well, it's new.
So I would think if he comes back with a plan and can figure out what to do with that fourth lot and how to deal with the mitigation for that one, you could,
As long as we have an open-mindedness and we'd be.
no,
we're gonna have to
we've come up
back
with
and,
some creative
you know,
projects, at least in my time here, that we've had to cross some wetland lines to put in septic systems that are way off the beaten path, but
And I think this, because the abutter does have other land, I think this is something that, you know, at least we have a lot to work with to be able to show what we can do as a concession to your bylaw, and I think that's important.
So your idea would be come back again on an informal basis?
I think, you know, we want to be able to get something that's really finalized, where we have a good feeling from the board and the commission to be able to go forward now with a full submittal to the planning board. You know, and again, you're still going to be part of that process that'll be a subdivision control, we'll have a notice of intent filing. And so, but at least it'll have something that we've all discussed, and it would be something that's a little bit more understanding when we come in.
Did everybody sign this?
Yes.
The reason I mention it is that since there won't be a legal ad or notification of abutters by the applicant, we could offer to, once we know it's gonna be on the agenda, to at least give a courtesy call to as many people as possible. I know there's no telephone numbers on here, but if somebody wants to give me their telephone and then you do the calling, or we could
Take turns.
do what?
I mean,
We
we
could
would
take
post it on the
turns.
agenda, which
It
would get
would,
posted.
it would be posted,
Yes.
so you could watch that. Either way, I think it's important that you people are involved with it.
And we as the applicants, we encourage it. You know, we don't come through here and have meeting after meeting and have a fight where we're really trying to do something that we think when it's all said and done, it's gonna be nice for the neighborhood.
But we really don't, most of us don't think this is feasible. So
Uh,
there's a lot of us.
You
that
live there
don't
now,
think
there's a
it's
lot of people who
Right.
want the same luxuries that you have.
But we didn't actually build that subdivision, we just bought into it.
Right.
We know now how much water is there.
And those will all be items that we'll really have an opportunity through the planning board. We have testing data, and the planning board will have their own review engineer. So everything that we do and submit, they'll have their own engineer to review the same thing, you know, for the applicant as part of that process. There's a lot of meeting stuff that you all have to say, so.
So is that top lot off the plan now, basically?
Well, you know, this, right now, the way that we have a little bit clear understanding of what the direction of the commission would be, I'd have the same, yeah.
Yeah,
That would be for more purposes.
As he said, a drainage lot or.
Yeah, it's something that, you know, for us to make the other part of it work and have a feasible, you know, it's all financial. If you can't build 800 feet of road and only get, you know, 2 lots out of it, it's just, you can't do it. So it's something we'll talk with the owner and the developer, and we'll come with our best proposal. That's right now, we understand them.
I'd like to hear in the future, I think it's gonna work, other than, well, I wanna hear, I hope it's gonna work.
It's
None
all
of
gonna
this-
be up to you.
Well, I mean, you're gonna be the developer, so I'd rather hear instead of, I think it should work.
When we're
to-
done with it,
It's gonna work,
be
because
proposed
you've done
as
it for
working, because he's
quite a
gonna be
while,
clean.
right?
35 years.
So you should have an idea what should work and what shouldn't work.
It'll work.
Yeah, of course it'll work, if he says it'll work. See, Cheryl's right, we bought into
Yeah.
that, we didn't build or develop that. You know how much water goes into our backyards and into our cellars.
Are
In
you
this-
on Mill Pond?
Yeah, on 11. And Cheryl's next door at 15. And we just have an incredible amount of water. This spring, sump pumps were going all spring long. I think if you put a building on something, it displaces the ground and the water goes somewhere. I can't see personally, I mean, I don't know anything about it, but you know, it's easy for the developer to say, oh, we can do this, we can do that. We went through this pool with our developer, and it doesn't work, it's just not true.
Yeah, would you have water in the basement?
No, we have sump pumps, everybody has sump
Oh,
pumps.
you would, if you didn't have a sump pump, you'd have water.
Yeah, the first
When
one
were
that we
your
had,
houses built?
94.
Still, you know, John can attest, but there's things that have changed. Years ago, water tables were determined, you dig a hole and you didn't see water, you were good to go.
Yeah.
So a lot of people get water in the basement. The modern method now is you go by soil, by the soil discoloration. There's a rust layer in there.
I was under the
You
impression
know-
this lot in the, what do you call it, Class A or whatever lot in the, this one here on the left was very, very difficult and didn't perk. At lot 7.
Both lots per. Both lots per.
Yeah, well, I know it did, because you got a lot there, but I was under the impression that it was very difficult and,
It's just a different rate. You know, the more difficult the rate, the bigger the system has to be. But it doesn't change what we're doing on the lot, it just changes the size of the system.
so in other words, you can put a septic system on any lot, you can put it on wetlands if you wanted to, because you
Not
can.
wetlands, no, yeah.
Well,
There's
I don't mean
buffers,
wetlands.
there's buffers from wetland.
It might be,
Wetland.
it might be instead of this high.
Exactly,
To
and
that
that's
high,
another thing that's
depending
we're
on-
concerned about, and that high is gonna run
Yeah.
right into our backyard.
Well, yeah, again, we know how to treat the runoff for surface water, sure. And we can guarantee that you won't get any of this water that now goes in your backyards.
Okay.
Because that is a
Is that gonna be
surface
a
water
writing
flow.
guarantee, or?
It's, if the plans are there, you'll see it work. You'll have review engineers, the conservation, you know, they'll have an opportunity to review the same plans, the planning board engineer reviews. The calculations are available and provided. If there's a change or something that they look at and want changed, they'll inform the applicants, engineers and developers, and the plans will be changed. It's,
If I
everybody
might-
works on it.
If I might add, the other thing is that he's talking about showing it on a plan, having it all reviewed and approved. And we go to the next step even greater in that once the thing is done and constructed, we won't issue a certificate of compliance, which then is basically a lien against the property if you don't get a certificate, unless the as-built shows exactly or very close to exactly the way it was designed. So if the as-built, let me back up, if the engineer is designing it in a certain way to take care of these concerns that abutters have, and a builder disregards it and does whatever they want, and then comes for a certificate, and it's not the way we approved it, we won't issue it, and we will make them go back and do it the way it was designed. So, that's probably a little different than in some towns where they're not quite as picky about it. We won't issue the certificate unless it's exactly the way, or very close to the exact way it was designed. And we'll make them go back and do it until the swale is the way it's supposed to handle the water, to prevent water from running down into the back of the mill pond lots, or putting water out on the street when it showed that it was going to take it onto the property and back to the wetlands. So that's all analyzed before we issue a certificate. So you get the analysis at the beginning, as it's being proposed by the review people, and then you get the analysis, excuse me, by the commission after the thing is constructed. And again, we can't guarantee even that is not gonna create an issue. Maybe somebody pumps out their swimming pool and all of a sudden you've got water in your backyard. Well, you know, we can't control that kind of thing. But if it's a design flaw, it doesn't get by us at the end. And there's a new subdivision in town that they didn't think they had to come back to us to show that they built the subdivision roadway and drainage correctly. And we kept harping on the planning board to not release the road until we received our as-built that showed it was built correctly. So the developer finally had to acquiesce and submitted it. So this is a pretty tough commission in terms of making people do things the right way. So again, I don't want to make it sound like we're guaranteeing anything, but we really do our due diligence to make sure that people aren't going to be impacted and that the wetlands are protected. And some people will say, well, if it's not wetlands, how can you worry about the people? Well, the commission are residents of your town, so they don't want to put themselves in a position that creates an issue for you. So that's why they do that. So I think we've got some direction for him to go in, and where he can't alter that little depression. Now you can work around all these comments and suggestions and come up with something that's worthy of the commission thinking about granting a waiver. And again, they're there for a reason, so it has to be a pretty good reason why it should be granted, to let you waive it to a certain extent.
We will do our best.
Did you have another question? Or you
Yeah,
answered it? Okay. All right, we do meet twice in September, the 6th and the 20th. I don't know whether either one of those dates.
I'd like, we probably more towards the end of the month, I think.
Okay, that would
what
be-
we have to do, and we wanna.
Better for us, because our
back
6th
and
meeting, I
back.
think, is a pretty big agenda, so.
Yeah, it is. So
At this point, I would tell the audience that more than likely it'll be on the agenda for the 20th, but call in that week, the day
Feel free to
before,
call.
if you want to call the office and just to verify that it is on the agenda.
And your meetings are posted on your website?
Yep.
So they know, and the agendas?
Yep.
So they'll easier, send, that's how you can, what's on the agenda, not just the meetings.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Can we have pictures of that, please?
Take a picture?
Yeah, sure, that's what you're waiting.
You can stand there if you want.
It's gonna change, it's not gonna look like that when we're done.
It's okay.
that's a new thing. Take some pictures.
Yeah, just give it, I think, give it to the secretary. I think you had requested a copy of the information that the owner had given as far as the history of the
Oh,
farm.
right, you have it?
Yeah, Craig brought it with him, he's got a packet.
Oh, how nice, thank you. Put it in the minutes, and it was his own personal records. Because they can afford things that don't have.
That was original.
That's a
Do we-
100-foot
do you want it
buffer.
back,
Any
or-
activity
No, I have
within
the
this
original.
100-foot buffer,
Oh, good.
the commission has authority to file. You have to file with them.
pictures
And
in there that
then
no
you
one's
have the
seen.
authority that goes on. It's all part. The 50 foot is what they really like to try to keep all control out of that area. And that's what we're,
That's what we're talking about, this lot
Yeah,
disappearing.
yeah, well, it's this one here,
Yeah.
but, it's this area here that they want to, preserve. And we need to see if we can provide mitigation to be able to use some of the inside buffer here, maybe give them some other, compensate what area we're asking to use, and some other piece of property that would compensate, so it's.
Okay, so this is my
I mean,
lot right
basically,
here.
after, through the
Are you gonna
conversations.
clear out all behind
it's
here?
basically looking at
Well,
something
they'll,
for-
what they'll be doing, they'll be.
5
clearing
lots,
enough to be
realistically,
able to
number 5 is
build a
just for
house.
drainage. Number
Would they keep
4,
this all
it's got to
natural?
do some
Oh, yeah, all of this will
creative.
stay natural, all will stay natural. We're certainly not gonna try to take anything along the tree line there, but, and there'll be a swale all the way along here, you won't even see it, it'll be a grassed area, there'll be a lawn, but this water will never come back on that side. So anything that comes down now will come all the way down this way and be put back into the drainage.
Now, how about if the water catches here in this?
It's all catch basins, it doesn't stay there, it goes in. The plans that we'll bring forward at the next meeting will certainly have more detail, we'll have a drainage set up, so you can see really how it's grading.
And I'm guessing realistically, most of the way these are done nowadays, the front of the lot, where the driveways are, is all gonna be sloped towards the road. So most of that's gonna be draining away from the front, so you're
Right.
even minimizing more what's going.
Right, but the concern is like, this water's all gonna run down this road.
But it's
To
all
this-
contained, it'll be directed this way,
It will be.
Yeah,
yes.
that's
It's all under,
the, where that's how they're supposed to design it.
Yeah.
And that's what we look to make sure they do.
We are taking a lot of water away from what's coming to your lot right now, or your direction of all the lots. water that comes to this lot up here also comes down here too, just the way that your lots are graded. But we're interceding in putting an area here, that none of that water that has always come that way goes there again. We'll be redirecting it. So that's what our intentions are. Thank you. again.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're available alcohol. if they have any questions. Well, no, I'm not telling you, I'm just saying that.
I think the next plan will have a lot more detail on it, to make it feel a little bit more knowledgeable what we're trying to accomplish. Again, thank you, the commission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 2 on our agenda. Discussion
We
for
have a
request to extend.
request to extend the order of conditions for 457 South Main Street. This is a result of a letter we received from ET Engineering Enterprises, Inc., requesting an extension of the original order conditions issued on August 4th, 2009. I want to make a point that we didn't receive the required fee of $75, which is required for an extension permit in West Bridgewater. This order of conditions would have expired on August 4th, 2012, but the Mass legislature passed the Permit Extension Act, which gave the order of conditions another 4 more years. The engineers requesting the extension is not the engineer that designed the project. So the current, or the engineer requesting the extension would need some time to be able to go over the original plans, what has been constructed from the years of 2009, and see exactly what's left and come up with any other design changes if necessary. This is not unusual when you have a switch of engineers, so I'm in favor of granting the extension. And usually the policy of the commission is 1 year, and the applicant can come back at another point in time before the 1-year extension is up and ask to have it extended again. But at this point, running from 2009 to 2016,
They've theoretically got a 5-year extension already on this.
yeah,
So,
so I think.
I mean, I'm thinking of
This is the one
think-
up there with a.
They're right behind.
Yeah,
oh,
right next to
which is
Lucine.
pretty much done, I believe, looking at it. I mean, it's got to be.
There's some unfinished things that haven't been completed that were shown on the original plan.
But the development part of the project looks like most of the structures, buildings, roads are,
For the most part.
for the most part, in. So that 1 year to finish up a punch list, so to speak, would
That's what
hopefully.
I'm hoping for,
Why is it taking them so long?
because we have the best engineer in the East Coast working on it. Now he has.
All right, so we have, I have a recommendation of granting the 1-year extension after receiving the required $75 fee.
Anybody have any questions?
What's the stuff that they have to do that's left?
Mostly drainage and planting.
What's in there now for renters?
For the renters?
Yeah, is there renters?
It's like two renters actually.
How many is supposed to be having in there?
5, 3 units are still empty.
And the drainage is not done yet?
I couldn't have, that's correct.
For what, the driveway or
The
roof
driveway
runoff?
and the parking that was done a little bit differently, so.
So where's it
those
going
are the
now?
items.
So where's the water going now?
Well, the water, but they didn't do a lot of paving that they were supposed to do. They basically did a recycled material, so a lot of that water goes into the ground. Doesn't run off.
Not much you can do about it, it's gotta get done.
I'll entertain a motion to
About
grant
6
a 1-year
months.
extension.
About 6 months.
But 1 year. He's got to know that he's got his 4 already, so.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second. All those in favor? Aye.
Okay.
Abstention?
6 months, I'd say. So it's gonna be winter time. What are you gonna do in the winter
Right.
time?
Well, that's why I'm looking for a
You should be able to
year
get
so
done
that
before
we can,
winter.
so we can work. Actually, I do want to observe what's going on when you have real rain going
It's
on.
been
there.
raining. Well,
Right, because it's been pretty dry.
well, I can't. I'm already upset.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So moved. You're all set.
Thank you. We'll drop off the check
But let's get it-
tomorrow. We'll drop off the check tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we have number 3, the,
At the last meeting, I mentioned that
We're gonna give it the.
we had a
the
request
payment.
to have the restoration order for 48 Harvestwood Drive, the corner of Harvestwood Drive and Spring Street, replanted, and it's now, we have the reports from the botanist and the wetland scientist that indicates that it's a success. And there were a couple of trees and shrubs that did not make it, but the majority of them did, and it's above the required performance standard that the DEP expects. So I'm recommending that you do lift the order and we send them a letter stating that.
I'll entertain a motion to lift the enforcement order.
I'll make the motion.
Second that.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved.
In fact, not to interrupt, but it's quite green out in that corner.
Yep.
The trees came back nice. I was worried about it before. Remember, I was concerned. I said, hey, why don't we send them a letter saying some of the trees are dead? They all came back.
Yep. Yeah, I was pleased. I was surprised, but pleased.
Quite nice.
It's amazing what Mother Nature can do, huh? All right, number 4, certificate of compliance.
We received a request to issue a certificate on a order of conditions that was issued in 2006. And it's coming from the subsequent owner, not the original owner. And so they've got their house up for sale. The attorney for the buyer's bank discovered that the certificate of compliance was never issued, and it was, of course, never requested, or it would have been. And so the new or current owner is now obligated to pay for the request and for the filing of the certificate. So I went out and inspected it on the 4th of August and found that everything's in order, and due to the time alone, it's very stable, so it's not creating any issues with the wetlands, and so I'm recommending issuing a certificate without a bond.
I will entertain a motion to issue a certificate of compliance without a bond.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. You have pages for us to sign?
Yes.
Okay. Number,
You want me to do the number 5 while I'm passing this out?
yep,
First thing I'm gonna give you is the signature page for the ORAD.
yep.
The certificate of compliance is next. And the extension permit. So number 5, 695 North Main Street. This is the contractor's yard up just past Ramco on the right-hand side or easterly side of the road. As mentioned at the last meeting, this property was sold at auction. The potential new owner, and I only say that in that they haven't closed on it yet, has complied with the request to put in erosion control barriers, and he's got them installed and properly installed, which is great. And then, in the meantime, he's removed the very large pile of miscellaneous debris and stumps and fill that was put behind that house, and remove that out of the wetland area, put erosion control in the edge of the wetland to protect it from getting any erosion until we can get it stabilized. And the next step is, once the person who's squatting there is evicted, they'll tear the house down and start pulling all that material out of the site, replacing the wetland with plantings, and then I would assume a new house would be requested, but it's not being requested right at this moment. So this is just an informational update on it, and things are going very well, and I'm very pleased with the current or potential new owner's response to it. He really going to town and cleaning it up. And the last item is, goes with this drawing that I gave you tonight. The town received a grant to do some engineering and planning for a dog park. This would be a formal area where it would be enclosed with a fence, which is the pink line on the plan that you see. And within that, there would be various areas where dogs could exercise, gather for social interaction and exercise. And there's even a place for waste disposal and drinking areas for water when they get a little thirsty. As you can see, the blue line is the flagged wetland, the orange is the 50-foot buffer, and the yellow is a 100-foot buffer from the wetlands. This is located just north of the current ball fields out to the rear of the town hall, behind the church, and to the rear of the church property, and also north of the far baseball field out in the far corner out there. So they're really in a very tight area, and before they go on to any further engineering, they want to know, is this still a viable project? Because they're encroaching on the 50-foot buffer. They label it as a 25, but it's a 50-foot. And my feeling is that if they were to make this somewhat usable, it slopes from the edge of the current ball fields down to the wetlands, so they need to keep it somewhat level, so they're gonna have to put some fill in there. And in order to not encroach any closer to the blue line, they're going to have to put a retaining wall in. Normally you just grade it down this way. By using a retaining wall, they wouldn't encroach any more than what you see on this plan. But if the commission isn't feeling comfortable about letting the proponents of the dog park go and encroach into the 50-foot buffer, then I think it pretty much scraps the whole plan. And they've received the grant, they're spending the money on the grant. I'm not saying you're forced into allowing it, but it's better to let them know at this point than to go any farther into the engineering design.
So they're spending the money right now?
Don't quote me on it because I wasn't involved, but I have heard that they received something like $10,000 to engineer
And design
and design a park.
Engineer design, so these right here,
What are the two round structures?
these are watering?
Watering areas, or?
I believe those are water areas, yes.
So-
Elevators.
And the dark lines or solid lines are, I think,
So there's gonna-
fenced off
Fence.
areas where they would be able to segregate.
So they're gonna have
Large
to run water?
Yeah. And then you'll see the waste area, they have a trench for
Okay.
a leaching trench, so they're gonna have to put
So is this all part of this $10,000 grant that they're gonna,
just the
you can-
design. The build it is going to be additional money.
and so, from what my understanding was, this $10,000 grant was supposed to take care of everything. That's what I thought.
No, I don't think it would.
No, not-
So I don't know if they're gonna try for another grant to actually pay for the construction.
But I don't know how they're already spending the money though.
Yes,
For
yeah.
the
they-
design part.
Did they, is this purchased property or was it donated?
This is
donated.
town,
Town
Okay,
owned.
it is town, so it's, they haven't done anything other than just designed it.
right.
And then they're gonna run water for watering stations
And have a.
and have to
leaching
maybe
system.
have a leaching system?
Leaching system for the dog waste disposal.
And then
area
maybe have to do a retaining wall.
And a retaining wall.
For dogs.
I took a quick look at it, and it looks as if it's possibly a 2 to 3 foot high retaining wall. I'm not in favor of letting them put in a landscape timber retaining wall because it's not permanent
Block.
enough.
And then they're gonna have to put like a fence on top of it probably.
Yep.
Chain link fence.
This thing is just getting too expensive.
So
This is all wooded now, correct?
It's
Or-
lightly wooded. I've been out there and I expected to have it heavily underbrushed, but apparently the kids go out there as the parents and other family members are watching the Little League players or whatever level they are. The kids are out playing in the woods, and so it's kept a lot of the brush down. It's fairly thin cover under there, and so if they do get any consideration for granting or having a waiver, I would say it'd have to be granted with some, and it's gonna add costly.
Could they clear cutting this to do this project, or are they?
They would end up cutting trees, yeah,
Which is gonna cost more.
so that they'd have to fill in the buffer with some heavy plantings.
So what are we voting for?
You're not voting for anything, you
This
just.
is just information that-
Guidance and
Okay.
what I can tell the engineer.
I mean, they're gonna have to come in and request a waiver. No
Yeah,
matter what.
No matter what, that's one of the things.
That's first off the plate. I mean, I don't know how everybody else feels. I mean, if they wanna come in and request a waiver, I think
So
that's the
if we don't
prerogative.
request the waiver, this scraps the whole thing?
If you don't grant it.
I mean, if we don't grant it?
Yeah, because I think, and I don't know for
Yep.
sure, but I think you're right in that, you'll notice on the sketch, it talks about target was 9,750 square feet of activity area, and they have it, but they don't have it by a lot, and so reducing it back to the 50-foot buffer.
That's if it was a rectangle. Now
Mhm.
that they're having to go with a triangle, they needed
Yep.
to make the space for exercise that much.
I think they should come in.
You want the engineer to come in and make the pitch.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be worthwhile. I mean, I just have a hard time if they're gonna clear cut that whole area in a 50-foot. What's it gonna be, all grass afterwards?
Usually it's grass, yes.
I mean, with no vegetation other than grass, that's a lot more drainage that's not being
Then put up a wall.
filtered or going into anything. I mean, right now it's a forested wetland buffer zone, and
It's protected right now.
yeah, I mean, it,
I don't see why it should be touched.
So if they were to come in, then the commission could request that the design incorporate leaving certain trees for shade.
I mean, to me, you'd want some shade in it.
No,
In
they
it,
got
I
plenty of
mean-
water holes.
I'm still not gonna be sitting out there with my dog in the bright sun all afternoon. I mean,
Can't they leave some trees?
yeah, I mean,
Well,
Yeah, I think-
sometimes when you grade a site, you kill the trees because you're filling or
I'll
taking.
design it to replant some.
Sure.
I mean, I don't think it's a total no-go, but I think they need to,
They need to give you some ideas and then also understand what you're gonna be looking for so that they can
Yeah.
incorporate that. Because my feeling would be that the typical drawing would be clear cut the trees, grade it to whatever we want it to be in the design, not we, the town, but
right.
the engineer. And now, if you say you want certain trees left, they're gonna have to go out and locate those trees. So you probably would want certain trees of a certain diameter.
That's why I'm thinking
maintained.
replanting some strategically here and there.
Trees and
I mean, you've got this
fireworks,
whole,
one of the
looks like a
other.
buffer zone where the leaching field is.
Large tires.
I mean, from the leaching field up to where the dugout is, it's like, you've got what, a 15, 20-foot wide strip? What's gonna be planted in that? I mean,
I'd like to see if they're going for another grant too.
they've got an area here, you could put a line of trees, or even down at the very end, or do some enhancement of a planting or something to,
And I think,
I mean, I know the town's trying to do this as cheap and as fast as they
It's
can,
not- not
but
though. It's turning into more.
we've gotta do our job, so it's a tough.
It's not tough whatsoever.
and I think to make it usable for other people who don't care to bring their dog into the park, a path connecting this to the rail trail, which is just north of this site, but again, within the 50-foot buffer, because the wetland line does come up quite close to the back of the church property. But then the rail trail is a nice extension of where everybody walks their dogs now. So it'd be a good way to connect the two together.
I mean, I foresee this hopefully keeping some of the traffic out of War Memorial Park that gets now, that could come use this area to help
But
alleviate.
then they could also, if you wanted to kind of like look at it in a different way, couldn't they put the watering holes, sanitation stuff in the town park? It's already there. Instead of having to do all this, create a new space
I
for
don't-
the dogs where you
I
can
don't think
go
they have any
walk.
space in the town park that's not outside our jurisdiction.
But they
At least
don't
this
have
is
one.
outside our jurisdiction.
But still, it's just, you think they want to do it towards the
I
town
mean,
park.
I think the idea of connecting it to the rail trail with some type of path would be a smart move too.
Yeah,
to
but
look
people, I've seen them walking dogs down there.
at. Right, I mean, I'm saying the rail
No.
trail gets used a lot, and
I don't think that
you're
would,
right, if people
would
are,
make a difference.
We always see cars parking on poles.
Yep, I've seen them walking their dogs.
but for people that can't walk their dogs and still want to take them somewhere to exercise, them having,
Town park, with a watering holes, sanitation thing, and all that.
at War Memorial,
Sure.
I want to see you go police that for me, will you?
I don't get, unless
I
get
step
paid
in
for
enough
it.
of it.
Unless I get paid for it.
Yeah, that's why if you had a designated area,
You
then you
never
could
know.
say to War Memorial Park that
But then you're gonna have some pay to do that though.
it's a fenced-in area that you can stay out of, and you know it's just for dogs. War Memorial Park, anybody can walk through there, and if you
Sure, it's
decided
public.
that you didn't want dogs in that, and they put up a sign that said no dogs, now
That's
they
it.
can go here.
Then they can, well, then they can put the signs up, but it doesn't say no dogs right now.
Right now, because we have nowhere else to put them.
Yeah.
I mean,
So I think what we need to do is have the engineer come in
Yeah.
and tell us
really what they're thinking, and
what their thinking is, what your thinking is as far as.
like you said, with a
Better
retaining
remain.
wall, you're gonna want that permanent. If you're gonna spend the money for a chain link fence, you're not gonna want timbers or ties. You're gonna
Yeah.
want something that's gonna hold up the time with not having to be replaced.
All right, that sounds good to me.
And is that it?
That's
That's
it.
it.
Oh, no, it isn't.
Oh,
Sign
Kitty's
that.
sneaking it in.
That's to get those people back their money.
This is the, for the return fee that we had voted at the last meeting to
Yeah.
return.
Is that it, Kitty?
Yep.
Signatures?
Yep, I'll entertain a motion.
Make that motion?
Seconded?
I have an FYI. I don't know if it's important or not.
We're adjourned.
Okay.
Yes, what's your FYI?
I was